Hi, guys, and welcome to the Good Old Days podcast. This is Leah Byers, and today we're going to be getting to know the life of Kara Ahmann. That was right?
That was exactly
I just
right.
asked you, and then I forgot. I was like, is it Ahmann or Ahmann? I know Kara through Vanguard University. She was my piano 1 teacher. I think it was the first piano class.
First piano class.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was also class piano 2 because
Maybe.
it was online. I think.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Maybe
so
maybe it was 2 because
There's
I
too many.
think that was it because we went online.
Yeah, and then Dr. Early did improv.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I know you from
Yes.
that, and you're an amazing pianist. Also just a super sweet human. Everyone knows that about you. But we're gonna start off with, I ask all my guests this. I just think it's a
Okay.
fun fact. What is your drink of choice?
Okay.
Anything.
My drink of choice is a triple grande non-fat latte.
Okay, wow. Have you had one this morning? I can hear it in your voice.
I have not had that, but I have had a lot of coffee. I always
Yeah.
have coffee. That's how I start my day.
Yeah, and I texted you. I was like, "Can I get your drink?" And you're like, "I have had my fill of coffee for today." And and I think you have that energy, the coffee energy. So it makes sense. I try to stick to tea. Coffee doesn't do me well sometimes. Otherwise, I'll talk too fast.
Okay. And I have been accused of that for sure.
Which makes sense. That happens. But that gets you through. You're a teacher. That gets you through the day.
I
literally.
know. My students may want a little less coffee, but
Yeah. They're like, "Can you repeat that slower?" Okay. Well, let's just start off. I don't know anything about your life besides the fact that you work at Vanguard and you were my teacher. But I have heard little stories that you've said about your university days, and maybe you're traveling after that. But we're going to start from the beginning.
Okay.
The beginning.
a long time ago, right?
Yeah. So tell me, when were you born? Sorry, we're going to reveal that if that's okay for you. But I would love to know when you were born and just where you grew up, your childhood, your family, and we'll go from there. So start however you like.
All right. Well, I'll take you back to 1964 and
Okay.
Bismarck, North Dakota.
What? I didn't know you grew up in North Dakota.
I did grow up in North Dakota.
Oh, wait,
Yeah.
but you're always cold all the time.
I know.
You'd think you'd be used to
because
it.
you lose that when you move. So
Okay.
I remember, I just remember my senior year of high school, I would be wearing these dresses, with nylons, high heels. And I remember just like parading through the snowbanks, snow boots. That wouldn't have been cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
no.
and I've always lived in cold places. I lived in New York City and I lived in Germany where they had obviously seasons, cold winters. But then once I got to California, that's.
You were like, "Yep, I'm staying here."
I know.
And then, but when you got to California, were you like really warm? Like you were like, "It's so hot here," or
Well, we moved during winter, which of course is usually the kind of the rainy season.
Yeah.
And so
not cold compared to
no,
North
and I was like,
Dakota.
what are people talking about? Sunny California, this is awful. And then after that, we got through that, then it was like June gloom. So finally we got the California weather, about 6 months later.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's so funny because like I said, we talked about this before. I know that you're always cold. You always you're wearing like a coat, you're wearing a long sleeve. I went up to you in your car and I was like, "It's so hot. I'm wearing a dress."
Yeah.
And you're like wearing a full coat. I'm like, "Girl, it's hot out." How are you wearing that?
I know.
So you grew up in North Dakota, and wow, like how is that? I can't even imagine. I grew up in Orange County, so it's warm here. I would never know what.
Well,
growing up
it
in
was
North
a place
Dakota's
of
like.
extremes. It would get really hot in the summer, and then
Humid or just dry or?
It could be. But in the winter, you had, I don't know, like minus 50 below with wind chill, and so it was just a place of extremes. But it was a great place to grow up.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that I was lacking in anything. We had, culture, we had orchestra, we had sports, we had everything.
Yeah, you had
have.
everything.
Yeah. So
maybe just indoors a lot of the time because of the weather. The schools there are indoors, right? They're not outdoors. Everything here is outdoors.
No, you could not have that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, no school.
No,
that'd be a snowy day.
No, we would have our snow days and I just remember, well, sometimes if you have, if it warmed up a little bit and like the snow melted and then it would get cold again, you'd have ice. And so I remember that happening. It would be super cool and we could go out and ice skate on the streets.
Gosh.
So that,
oh my gosh, on
yeah.
the streets?
On the
that's
streets,
so
yeah.
cool. That's like sweet memories.
Yeah.
Do you have any siblings?
I have one brother who's 2 years younger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So were you guys close?
Yeah, and he's actually lives in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's a lawyer. He went into a different profession.
Way different than you.
Yeah, but he, he's very musical and he, he took lessons too, and the music was kind of in our family.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, you're a teacher at Vanguard. You teach private music lessons along with accompanying and music classes or piano classes.
Right.
And so when you were young, I've had a lot of people on this, basically everyone in this podcast so far has music in their life.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a theme that's going on. I don't know. We'll see if it continues.
Yeah.
But when you were young, was that like a big part of your life right off the bat?
It
your
totally
whole family
was.
plays music?
They weren't necessarily professional musicians, but a lot of self-taught. So my dad sang at a lot of weddings. He played the violin. My mom played the piano. She did a lot of accompanying. Both sides of the families. My mom's dad was he played in a lot of bands and he played numerous instruments. My dad's dad was kind of a celebrity musician.
Oh, really?
He I want to say it was probably the 1930s. He went on a radio show at the local radio station, and he was such a hit that they just kept on having him back, and he did that just for years and years. He was known as the Friendly Singer. So
oh my
he
gosh,
played the
like a little
guitar.
stage name, the Friendly Singer.
Yeah, and he actually so this probably really dates me, but Lawrence Welk, famous big band leader, had the Lawrence Welk show for years. But my grandfather used to kind of be the warm-up act for him.
Oh,
but so
cool.
he was always doing different. I don't know, I guess you could call them gigs or performances, and he was in a lot of different bands himself. But what he was especially loved for, North Dakota is the home of many Norwegian immigrants, and so he sang in Norwegian. And the old Norwegians used to call the radio station, request all these Norwegian songs. Yeah, so he did albums with some of his different groups, and then when I think I was about 7 years old, we did he always wanted to do a family album. And so our
like
whole family did it. Yeah.
That's
so
fun.
each of my aunts and uncles and my dad, did a solo, sang a solo. And then there were some group numbers. And I played the piano on that too, for
cool.
that. So it was like the first thing. And I still remember the old recording trucks. So we did it at our house, and there were all these vans that showed up and all these chords. I just remember going into our house and the neighbors were going like
looking at what's
going on at the Christensen house. But that lasted a couple of days, and he pulled it off, and it was
that is like so much harder than it is now to just record something. Like you could just record something on your phone,
So,
they're like bring a whole van in with all these chords and equipment, and oh my gosh, that's crazy. And so that was that just a random family album, or like that you recorded, or was it like Christmas, or
no, it was a lot of hymns. In fact, that's one of the projects I'm working on now. I'm going back
full circle.
A lot of those hymns, and I'm doing arrangements to record. And so I've got some of them done, but for instance, my dad did his big solo was How Great Thou Art, and he always got asked to do that at weddings, funerals, things. And so that was one of them that I recorded. It's an arrangement that is put together, a really cool arrangement that incorporates Clair de Lune, because they have some of similar motives, and it's very cool how the composer was able to do that. And
that's cool.
Then I did an arrangement of a couple of the other pieces, and I just finished up one that my uncle did, and it's kind of in a jazzier style of Just a Closer Walk with Thee. So I'm working on some of those old.
You're like bringing them back, but in a new style.
Yeah, and so it was kind of a mixture of that, and then some that are Norwegian music, some folk tunes, and things like that. So that's kind of a fun project.
Yeah, just bringing back the Norwegian tunes.
Yeah, going back to the roots.
That's so funny. The Norwegians called the radio and were like, "We want the friendly singer."
I know. Yeah.
That's
They just, because at that time there were a lot of, well, now there really aren't, but at that point in time they were the people who actually came over, and
in specifically North Dakota, that's like where there were a lot of Norwegian.
Yeah, there were a lot of Norwegian farmers. A lot of them
didn't know that.
Farm. Yeah.
Okay.
So my grandparents were born in this country, but some of their siblings were born in Norway.
Oh, okay. So you do have Norwegian in you?
My dad was full blood Norwegian, and then my mom half Swedish, half Italian.
Oh, okay. And so in your childhood, you just started learning piano, which obviously you're still doing.
Yes,
very much so.
Yes, you can. There's never an end to the learning. Yeah, that's for sure.
And did you fall in love with that right away? Was that like your thing? Was that your hobby as a kid?
I'd say that my childhood, I would say, was well-rounded. We did everything.
Sports.
Yeah, well, not so much sports, but more dancing.
You're like, not sports.
Yeah, not sports. I mean, ice skating, but it wasn't like you could go take soccer.
Yeah.
So
ice skating makes sense.
Yeah. Now I know they've got all of the different sports, but back then it was, more hockey.
Yeah. Ice sports, basically.
Yeah.
Skiing, all that stuff.
Dance, and I was in dance groups at school, the high kicks, jump splits.
Oh my gosh.
That was fun. So I did that.
You're saying that so casually. That's actually hard. High kicks, jump splits, I'm like, no, I could not even do that. That's fun.
Yeah. So it really wasn't until, I guess I was about 16 when I decided, let's try this music thing out, because I figured, I could always go back. My parents were always into sciences too. My dad was an engineer. My mom taught college and higher level high school math, and so it was never hard for me, because if I ever had a question, they'd always explain things to me. So I was thinking, well, a lot of my teachers were kind of saying, we need more female engineers, and kind of pushing towards that. And then what made me kind of decide for sure music was that I knew that I would have one chance, because if you want to attend a conservatory, they're not going to take you if you're older. They want to get you when you're still young enough to do something.
And that's something that you have to commit to, right? Were you like, I'm going to do this, or was it?
Well, I was, so when I started my senior year of high school, I had just turned 17, and we were kind of talking conservatories, and then this opportunity came up. Oddly enough, my very first piano teacher, who I was with for numerous years, who I really credit a lot of where I've gone to because of her. She was absolutely against my playing another instrument. So for years, she never knew that I played the flute and piccolo.
Oh my gosh.
No, that had to be kept hidden.
So it was a
secret.
She never knew.
Yeah, she couldn't have known that, or else it would have been awful.
Which, that's so interesting, because a lot of teachers who, this was your piano teacher, right?
Yes.
Who didn't want, like a lot of, I feel like for my students, when they say they want to play another instrument. I'm like, well, piano is a good base to start with,
Right.
learning how to read music. And a lot of instruments are in the same staff or similar. So, you're already learning a little bit. Obviously, you don't know how to hold and play the instrument. But that's funny. She was like, you can't play anything else.
No. And had she known that I was in these, dance groups
secret
and
piccolo groups.
Right. If she had known, she would have it would have been like, she was very controlling and,
like an intense piano teacher.
Very,
Did she hit your hands?
No, she wasn't like that. She actually had a big career, and she studied with the best in New York City. She actually studied, and this is, I tell my students today that they can trace their musical lineage clear back, to Beethoven, because this, my very first piano teacher, who I was with from preschool through high school, she studied with Adele Auster-Oey in Europe, who was one of the most famous pupils of Franz Liszt. Wow. And she was a woman who studied with him. And there's a lot of interesting information about her and her life. But then, of course, the lineage goes back from Liszt all the way back.
By piano teacher, the lineage of your piano teacher. It's always going to go back to Beethoven.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. That makes sense, though.
So she was one that she was teaching... she concertized throughout the country. There was this thing back in the day called the Chautauqua Circuit, and they literally were on the road, traveling in old-fashioned cars. But she had a big career, and she was also teaching at the university level, and she just was so frustrated at what the caliber of the students. So she said she was going to go back and she was going to start from the ground up. And she specialized in preschool methods.
So wait, she was frustrated in the caliber of the students
that came in unprepared. Just technically, musically. And so
not well-rounded and...
No.
This is specifically for piano.
For piano. So that's what she did. She set up, she went back to her home state, which was North Dakota. She went to the capital, Bismarck, and set up a conservatory. And she was a great businesswoman, and she opened up her doors, and she taught there. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and read exactly what year she taught to, but she taught for years, and especially in the later years that I was taking with her, she was blind, and but she knew the music so well, and she could listen by listening.
It, seriously,
So she, but she was very serious about what she did, and so back to the piccolo story, she wanted me to maybe try to play for some teachers and audition, for some conservatories. And so as it turned out, I was selected for the McDonald's All-American High School Band to play the piccolo. And back in the day, they took 2 from every state, and they sent them, all of these 100 kids, out to New York for the Macy's Day Parade. So we went to New York, we rehearsed, and then
for
also
McDonald's?
the West Coast.
Like
McDonald's? Yeah. Yes.
The McDonald's?
The McDonald's. They had
I was like, is this a different music thing I've never heard of?
No,
you're talking about McDonald's.
They had a band each year that was in the parade.
And this was for the Thanksgiving parade.
This was for the Thanksgiving parade. And then we also had other things. We went out and did the Rose Bowl, and some other...
Did she see you on TV playing the piccolo? Is that how she found out?
She found out because it was like, well, okay, you want Kara to play for these teachers, in New York. Well, she's going to be in New York, and so that's how she found out. And then she was fine with it then because it got me to New York. So that was. And of course, I was flying out to New York. There was a big snowstorm, got snowed in, but she contacted one of her friends, which happened to be a pianist named John Browning. John Browning and Van Cliburn were students at the same time that she was with the Levines, a pair of a husband and wife team, New York City, Russians, but they were teaching at Juilliard, and so she studied with them. She was a little older when she studied with them, but she was friends with both of them, and she always said that the Levines spoke extremely highly of John Browning, and he was doing more teaching. So she contacted John and said, "Hey, I've got this student, can you hear her?" And at that time he was concertizing a lot, and he said, "Well,
how old were you at this point? This is
I
when
was
you were
16.
graduating?
I was
Oh, okay.
16, so I was a senior. Just before I turned 17, and he said, "Well, there's a teacher here that I really respect a lot, and I teach a lot with her, and I work with her students." So he put us in touch with her, and so then I went out and I played for her, and then McDonald's, yes, the McDonald's,
the
hamburger place. They not only did they pay for like everything there, but they also arranged for one of their chaperones to take me to her apartment
to do like an audition.
To do an audition, and so that's really how I ended up in New York City, and so
Yeah,
that
and
was.
And you got in to. Is this you getting into Juilliard?
This I did my undergrad at the Manhattan School. She was at the Manhattan School of Music, so I was with her for 4 years, and then I switched to Juilliard for my master's because I wanted there was somebody I wanted to study with there. So that got me to New York, and once I was there, it was wonderful because
how is
everything.
living in New York City? I'm curious. How long were you there for?
6 years, because I did.
Years?
Yeah,
Oh my
I did. Yeah, I studied there for 6 years.
Were you in Manhattan? Living in Manhattan?
I was
Oh my
in
gosh.
Manhattan, which is actually another story about that flute that I wasn't supposed to be playing. My parents said, okay, I would have been 17 by then. They said, well, you're 17, you're not moving to New York City on your own. And back in the day, none of the conservatories anywhere in the country, I mean, universities had dorms, but conservatories didn't. Now they all do. But they said, you're not going to move there. And
well, yeah, you were like 17.
Yeah, so you're not going to go to an apartment. And what happened was my parents knew of this place called the International House. And they actually met in an International House. There are two in the United States. One is in Berkeley, where they were in school. And then the other one happens to be in New York City. And it's like a dorm sort of atmosphere. There's a cafeteria. There are all sorts of programs. There are individual...
That's for conservatories programs.
It's only for international and graduate students, and which I was neither. So my mom, contacted the place, and they're like, nope. And then somehow it came up that they had an orchestra, and they needed instrumentalists for their orchestra. So
you're like, I play the flute.
yeah. So
you didn't say I play the piano. You were like, I'll play the flute for you.
Yeah. So they needed a flute player in the orchestra. So I kept on calling because everything was hanging. If I didn't go there, then I would be going to a university, and I really wanted to go study, with this teacher that I had met. And so anyway, I kept on calling them. I was like calling them, and even up until like the beginning of the summer, I didn't know for sure that I could go. So finally they're like, yes, you can play as long as you play the flute in our orchestra, you can live here.
They really needed a flautist. Is that how you say it?
They did. So I did that. I lived in an apartment. No, I lived there for 3 years before moving into an apartment. But here's just like a kind of a fun fact that I do have to tell you. We kind of joke about it because my parents met in the International House in Berkeley, but that's where I met my husband.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so he was an international student. So he was, and he was also a grad student. So he was okay to be there. I kind of got in on a technicality. Yeah.
So you met him there in, how old were you, 17?
I was a little older then. I think I was 19, a little bit older.
Well, you said you were 3 years there for 3 years. So
I was
like at
there
the end
for
of that.
3 years. So I met him my junior year. So I would have been 19.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he was in New York City for 2 years. He went to Columbia University, so he was there for 2 years. And then we had a long-distance relationship for a couple of years when I was doing my master's degree in New York. He was in Chicago for a year and then Germany.
And you were in New York for 6 years. 4 of those years were at the conservatory? Or
6 of them were, because I did 4 years at the Manhattan School and I did 2 years at Juilliard.
Gotcha. Yeah. What was it like moving from North Dakota to New York? Like even just, well, obviously a huge difference just in the states or the cities, but like, how was that leaving your family and going to a new place, not knowing anybody?
You know, it was
Exciting.
It was exciting.
Yeah.
It really was exciting. And well, and you know, from, you know, your college experience, that the people that you meet there are, you know, some of the contacts that you know continue the, you know, the rest of your life. And so I've have a lot of friends that I met in my 6 years there that I still see or run into.
Oh, that's cool.
You know,
Yeah.
so it was a really great experience, and just all the concerts. You know, I took advantage of a lot. And
your life was surrounded by music.
It
So
was, yeah.
What did you do during that time? Like, what was your normal week like? Probably a lot of concerts too.
Yeah, a lot of concerts,
Orchestras.
but a lot of time in the practice room. I mean,
Oh my gosh,
pianists.
Yeah. How many hours a week did you spend?
Oh, hours a week.
Or
Oh,
a day.
boy.
How about a day?
It, you know, it depended on I just practiced whenever I didn't have class. So it was a science to getting a practice room. So I would have, you know, I had my routine. I'd get up and I could sign for a room at the International House. So I'd get a couple hours usually in the evening there.
They had practice rooms.
They had practice rooms there. Then I would head over to, this was in my early days at the Manhattan School. Then I would head over to the school. You'd go wait in a little line. You'd want to get the first in line so you could get the keys to the good rooms. And what was really cool.
With the good pianos? Were there specific
so
rooms
we
with the good
all
pianos?
knew that too. And by the end of those years, I actually had a master key to every room in the building. But you would have to go to sign out the time. But you knew the system, and then there were some rooms that were just open. So if you had a little bit of extra time, you'd go in there, and I rarely had to wait. But practice rooms were in short supply, but you had to be really smart about it. But I would say, you know, 6 to 8 hours every day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's a job.
Yeah,
That's literally a job.
Yeah. And then the same thing, you know, down at, when I still lived up in that area, which is, the Manhattan School is in the old Juilliard building. So it was really fun to go in, and one of the rooms, my favorite rooms, was the room that my teachers teacher. So Rosina Levine taught in at Juilliard, and so that was the old Juilliard, the new Manhattan School, and then Juilliard was located down at Lincoln Center. And so I would just get up in the morning, and you just get there immediately when the school opened up, and practiced. And then on the weekends, I was still able to get into the International House because I was able to keep up a membership there. So I didn't always have to go down there on, well, Saturdays the school wasn't open anyway because the prep division, they have a large prep division, and you couldn't get in until the evening. So, you know, it really was, when you're saying daily routine, that's one of the big things, just the practice. But a lot of concerts, tons of concerts. We got tickets, free student or partially discounted student tickets to all of the
orchestra
big
concerts
orchestra
throughout
Carnegie,
the city. That's cool.
all of the halls. Yeah, it's great.
And you got to see. Did you ever perform in any of those spots?
Well, I never performed in Carnegie, but I have been there with my daughter when she performed there too. So that there's a smaller concert hall adjacent, which is actually part of Carnegie Hall. But in some of a lot of other venues in New York City. But yeah, it was great. And I remember the very famous pianist Horowitz. That was probably the most memorable concert because a group of us from Juilliard literally camped out the entire night on the cold pavement of New York City.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was
outside of Carnegie. Was that at Carnegie?
That performance, it was his last performance ever, and it was in the Met. It was in
in the Met.
In the Met.
Oh my gosh.
So he performed there, and so we were on the streets of.
Was it winter?
It was winter,
oh my
and
gosh.
yeah, and
it's cold.
Literally from like, I don't know if it was like dinner time until
the next
morning. And it was worth it. Yeah, it was worth it. Got in.
I feel like it's funny to think about because people do that now for, celebrities and fairly famous, whatever bands and stuff. And it's just funny. You're like, I'm going to go see this pianist.
Yeah.
And famous pianist.
It was like a huge event the night before. We would, we were all out there and the line just extended. And I don't know when the tickets sold out. Luckily, I got mine and got out.
And it was the most memorable
it was
one,
incredible.
So worth it.
Yeah.
Do you have any like cool stories from living in New York or crazy stories? It's a pretty crazy crazy place to live.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, yes.
Yeah. Well, gosh.
Which one?
Which one, boy? My mom always had this thing like, when a boy asks you, you never say no, because you always go with the first boy who asks you.
Okay.
So that advice might have served me well in North Dakota. But so I get to New York and here I am. There's this guy I think he was from Ethiopia, and he wanted to take me on a walking tour of the neighborhood.
Okay.
And so, long story short, he ended up, he kept on getting closer and closer, and I'm like trying to get away. I had a bad feeling about going on this. I didn't want to go. And anyway, he ended up biting me on the lip. He bit me on the lip. And so I had this big, like
aggressively?
Aggressively, but he was being just amorous.
Oh my gosh.
So if that wasn't bad enough, I still didn't kind of learn that, it's okay to say no,
Yeah,
so
that's not a good tip
I don't
for
know
New
if
York
it was
City
a cultural thing, but so then there was...
I'm going to say no.
No.
I'm going to hope not.
Yeah. So then this guy from Turkey, at the International House, same thing, bit me on the lip. So I was like, what is with this? Is this like a cultural thing?
Yeah.
So anyway, that was what came to mind immediately. So I don't think that's
your first crazy
that's
story.
My crazy
You're like,
story.
Should I say this?
I don't
That's
think
funny.
so. That's what came to mind. I was like, I don't think people need to know that.
No, that's funny though. Well, do you have any others that you could think of maybe that you want to say?
that memory just keeps on coming back, clouding over.
Yeah, that is crazy. Wow, it's funny though.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. Are we good?
We are good.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, no stories.
And no stories that are maybe worth repeating, right?
Yeah. Let's just say New York's a wild place.
New York is a wild place.
And things happen. Okay, so you met your husband. Let's move on to that.
Let's move on to that, yeah.
Not the other dating stories.
No, I know. We'll forget those dating stories. Yeah.
So you met your husband at the International House,
yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
And you guys dated for how many years?
We dated for 4 years before getting married.
Mm-hmm. What was he studying, you said?
He studied business.
Okay.
He was doing his MBA at Columbia at the time. So that's where we met.
Cute. And then, wait, sorry, how many years did you say?
4.
4. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you guys got married. How many years have you been married?
Oh my gosh, I would have to figure that out. I guess it's been over 25 because we were married in 1988. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Oh, wait,
That's
what am
way
I saying?
more.
Wait, that is way more than 25. Whoa.
Wait, 30.
Yeah, that is more like,
5?
35, yeah.
35. Way
Way
off.
more.
10 years
yes.
off.
Time flies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you guys get married, and where do you stay in New York, or
No,
what did it look like after you were done with school?
Well, so he actually was working in Germany for the last year that we were together, and so that was like a great opportunity for a pianist because I really wanted to continue studying, and then I also wanted to do. I wanted to perform.
Yeah.
So that was the
It's
perfect
crazy
spot.
you still wanted to continue studying more after 6 years and 8 hours of practice every day. You put in your 10,000 hours for sure.
Yeah, I probably did. But
Probably.
I did actually continue a lot of practice in Germany. Well, and I found that, I would, I would learn a couple of programs, and then I would just, I'd literally go and play them again and again, different spots.
So this was in Germany?
This was in Germany, yeah.
Like, where would you play?
Well, I had someone who was arranging and booking different things for me. And at first, it was mostly Germany. But then I did do some things in other countries, well, everything is so close together.
Yeah.
Italy and France and Austria and but I think probably it was a different, believe it or not, it was a different style of teaching in Germany, and the Germans were at the time you
were being taught there, or you were teaching?
I actually did both, but my main thing was performing.
Okay.
So the Germans had this thing like only the Germans can play Bach, Beethoven, Schumann, because that's Germanic
where they
music.
Came from.
But I actually did learn a lot from them. There is a different. There's a depth that they have, and I hear it. I hear it in
the way they play.
The way they play, and
what would you say is the difference?
It's more of, I don't want to, it's very hard to explain.
But you just can hear it.
You can hear it. And especially the more concerts that I attended, and then working with my teacher too, she would be like, you're playing that Bach Prelude and Fugue like an American. And that was
what does that mean, though?
I know. I was like, that is so ridiculous, But that's what I thought at the time. But it was something that it's like, she would be like, think of yourself being in this church, and so you're thinking to different things like the sound quality. So if you go visit some of the these historic spots,
like any of the cathedrals,
right?
The acoustics,
the sound, it's all a little different. So it's kind of a sound thing, and it's also too, you kind of have to have a pretty good reason for your interpretation. It couldn't just be like a willy-nilly, I can play this virtuosically, so that's how I'm going to do it, which is, I think that's what they, coming out of the New York conservatories, a lot of people in Europe had that impression that's kind of the Juilliard factory, but I really, I'm glad that I had that opportunity. But I think for me, what the biggest thing that happened for me professionally over there was when the wall came down. So
wow.
Yeah. So when
you were there when it came down.
Yeah. In fact, I was. I remember so vividly because we had been there about a year and a half, and I was getting ready that weekend. We were going out to Bayreuth, which is well known for Wagner operas, but I was doing a recital in a concert hall there to wonderful piano, a Busendorfer, which are the ones that have extra keys at the bottom.
Oh,
beautiful piano, beautiful facility, and that's when the wall came down. So the wall came down like on a Friday. Saturday, we were in Bayreuth, which happens to be right at the border of the former West and the former East Germany. So it was like this party atmosphere because all of the East Germans were coming over. This is the first time a lot of them had even been back to the West.
Yeah. And before that, was there kind of a commotion that it was, things were going to happen? Or could you feel that?
Maybe, but I don't know if anyone actually really believed that it would happen until it happened.
Get their hopes up.
Yeah.
Wow. So it was like a party in the streets.
And you could, it was like, you could tell who were the East Germans because they had these little cars called Trabis, really short to the ground, tiny little cars that made a lot of noise, gave off a lot of pollution, but they were going down the Autobahn, going a lot slower than everybody else in their Audis and BMWs, but they were like waving, and the West Germans were waving, honking, and you look into their cars. Interestingly, what they had all bananas and Western German chocolate.
That's like what all of them brought.
Yeah.
They're like, let's
Yeah.
bring over the bananas.
Yeah. And so I'm sure that they didn't make it as far in as Munich, which is where we were. So it was kind of fun to be like right by the border.
Yeah.
So that was
it's a
fun.
historical event to be literally in the country where it happened.
Yeah. And for me, at that point in time, there were no American performers in the East. So I was already there. And so that opened up opportunities in the East. So I started doing a lot of performances in the former East Germany. And at that,
You were in the West.
I was in the West. And then, we of course
you
didn't
said that
go
that
there.
changed things professionally for you.
Yeah.
So you said you got to go over to the East.
Yeah,
and start
because
doing
I was
things.
kind of a novelty back then because
There weren't a lot.
there were no
Yeah.
Americans, in the East, and so that's where I did a lot of recitals, chamber music, and it looked very different. Now when you go to the East, the former East, it all looks like one Germany, but at that time it looked like it was back decades. And
That's
the
crazy.
pollution and the cobblestone streets and
You're like, I'm looking in a different time, like
Yeah.
time of,
but the
different decade.
people were so welcoming, so fun. I did a recording there, and it was set up through a contact with the Bayerische Rundfunk Orchestra in Munich, and the sound engineer was able to get a really nice church with great acoustics, and it was but the bad thing was we had to record in the middle of the night because it had to be quiet.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's like right in the middle of the
It
night.
was in the middle of the night, and I just remember I would, you'd have to do things over again, different takes, and I remember getting this great take, and I ended on this nice soft note, and I'm thinking, it's, got that one.
Got it.
And then this Trabi, the old cars went by, and I'm hearing beep, beep, beep. I don't know what it was doing out at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And so then
You're like, my recording is ruined.
So that guy, I'll never forget this because he was in a different room in I don't know, with his equipment, and he would speak to me over a microphone, and there was a speaker there, and he was like, "Do it again."
So sad. You're like, dang it. This was just you on your own?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Were you recording that for something specific?
Yeah, it was a recording for a CD that I did of all solo music. Yeah.
How many albums have you done?
Well,
CDs?
I haven't done that many.
You started when you were 7. That was that first one.
I guess I can count that one, right? Yeah. And believe it or not, you can still get that album. It's online. Yeah. And if you want any, I've got boxes of them. I inherited.
Oh my gosh. We should make that the intro of this podcast. You playing piano at 7.
No, it's funny because I inherited a lot of things, from my parents' home. Each time my mom moved, I seemed to get more, and then my parents were the oldest kids in both of their families, so everything from my mom's parents went to their house, everything from my dad's, and they saved everything back in the day, and so I have literally boxes upon boxes of everything.
All those CDs.
Yeah.
So how many things did you record when you were in Germany?
In Germany, I have a lot of romantic music recording. Because that's usually what I tended to do the most of. So what I was recording in that moment was Schumann Kreisleriana.
I'm like going, like I know what that is. I really don't.
Yeah, so there was that.
Yeah, I know all these names.
Yeah. Well, Mendelssohn Variation. I recorded,
I know the names, but
yeah. I recorded my favorites. My favorites that but yeah, that was a flood back of memories.
I know, yeah.
Things that you don't think about for years and years.
Yeah, like I said, I was like, you're going to start remembering things.
Right.
You don't think about it.
Some things that I didn't want to remember.
Yeah. You're like, oh, man. So, Yeah. So then you were in Germany and you came back here. When did you move to California?
It was 1994. Actually, it was
Did you
the
go
beginning
back
of
to New
1994.
York or?
No, we came to California, and I still was doing a lot of going back and forth to Europe, and then and I was doing a lot of performing too, up through the time that my kid somebody needed to be home for the kids, so that was I think I had a couple of experiences, like I was doing a concerto back in the Midwest, and at that point in time I had one child. I had three, and so my
When was your firstborn?
he was born in 1994.
Okay.
So when we moved back to the States, and so he was little. And my mother-in-law met me, and she was the babysitter when I was doing that.
Yeah, and you were like traveling still.
I was.
Pretty
It was crazy. And so I thought, well, it'd be nice to take him. But what I made a big mistake. I did not want to pack diapers because that's bulky. So I got diapers when we got, where we were going. But I switched the brand, and I didn't realize that he was allergic to it. So I didn't know it was, so he was up all night crying.
What was it like?
It was like just a rash. It was a simple thing, just like a contact dermatitis, but up all night crying. So literally got no sleep. I can't remember what concerto I was doing at that point in time, but it was back-to-back performances. So one night, so no sleep at all. That first night, I just had to play it without up all night.
Did you forget anything?
By then, you just know it so well. You can do it in
it's in your hands.
Yeah. I think it was a Liszt concerto. I think, or maybe it was a Saint-Saëns concerto.
Which is what you were.
And then, so that was like, okay, I'm not going to bring any kids with me in the future. So then I
never doing that again.
No, but then it just got complicated because, they would have to be places. And so I just made the decision just to kind of, to focus really on my kids for those years, which is what I did. I did some recitals, some sporadic things here or there, but for the most part,
And your hope, like, personally for me, when I was going into my major for music, I wanted to perform, and then I realized I didn't enjoy it. It was very stressful for me.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like a accomplishment, like excitement, fun thing. It was more like I'm extremely stressed out and I don't want to do this. But when you went into doing piano, that was your main goal, was to perform originally, or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And so, I did teach, but and especially like when I was trying to perform when the kids were young, I didn't do any teaching just because I wanted to devote all my time that I had to the piano, which was a lot less to performing. Yeah. So that was definitely the goal. And then I went back I went back, and started up again, mostly teaching, but some performing too.
Once your kids were older?
Yeah, once they were older. Yeah.
How did you balance the kids and practicing? Because, I mean, you got to get in those hours.
Yeah, that was a challenge for sure. That was definitely a challenge.
Was there a certain point to where you're like, I don't have time to practice, so I need to put a break on this because I won't, do well? Or?
Well, I just was really careful about, I did take on performances now and then, but I always had to be super careful because if one of them got sick or so I had to, not a lot of travel, but also, I just had to allow more time to prepare. So in the event that something happened, that outside of my control.
Yeah. And then you started teaching more, right?
Yeah.
And when was that?
I went back. I actually started, it's kind of an odd sort of situation because I was kind of thinking about getting back into things when my youngest started to drive. So that was...
There you go. Then you're free because they can drive themselves everywhere.
Exactly. Literally was a professional driver. That was my big job, and PTA president, things like that. But my middle daughter is also a musician, and she was a singer, and she was taking some lessons with Ryan Riethmeyer.
Wait, do I know?
Yeah, Dr.
Okay,
where were you at Vanguard when he was
No,
there?
I've heard the name though.
Anyway, he was like, well, you know what? Because I used to play for her lessons, so I would go with her up to Vanguard. I mean,
that's so funny. So she was in her private voice lessons?
She was.
And you were accompanying?
Well, she actually was studying. She studied with somebody else, but she did some coachings, and so we would go up to Vanguard, and so I would sit out in that little hall and
piano rooms.
Yeah, and then I would just play for her lessons because there was
that weird for her? I feel like I wouldn't want my mom on my lessons.
Well, you know what?
Or did she enjoy that?
It wasn't weird in the respect that she was kind of getting something out of it.
Yeah.
So, and we still do a lot of things together, a lot of performances and things. But I was in those lessons, and I think I posted something on Facebook, and I was like, I was doing some well, they weren't professional. They were just some photographs for some professional things that I was starting to do. And Ryan happened to ask me, what's that for? And so I told him, he goes, well, you know what? We really need an accompanist here. Why don't you think about it? So I was like, well, okay. And so so then he introduced me to Doc. And that's how I came to be at Vanguard. And then
was that the beginning of your teaching, or
that was the beginning of my days at Vanguard? But I had also gone back to some limited private students. Now that my kids are grown, I've got about 50 private students.
Yeah, I know.
But
crazy.
Back in the day I didn't. But then it just kind of grew at Vanguard. Okay, well, we need somebody to teach class piano, and then can you take on the piano majors, and then can you do this, can you work on the curriculum? So it just kind of blossomed
all of a
into
sudden you're doing a lot more.
Yeah, I wasn't really planning on that, but it just kind of happened. Yeah,
and you have 50 students. I can't believe that. I think I remember we were passing each other at Vanguard, and I was like, oh, what are you doing? You're like, I'm going to private teach. And I was like, oh, how many students do you have? And you're like, 50. And you said it so casually. Yeah, I was like, that's a lot.
I cap it at that.
You should cap it at less.
I know.
That's so many. But that's all around, right? Or is that separate from Vanguard?
That's separate from Vanguard.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Separate from the private students too?
So
do you teach privately at Vanguard?
Yeah, I do. I'm not counting them into my private, but I'm 2 days a week at Vanguard. So I
just don't know how you do that. That's crazy. But like I said, we were talking, they come to you. They do
come to me.
I go to everyone. So I can't imagine driving to 50 different houses.
Yeah, that's a huge
I drive to 10 different houses and I can't do it.
Oh.
I can't.
Yeah. And some people really, really want that. I don't like doing it because I don't want to haul everything, because I've got all my things, my visual aids. I like to do a lot of games, like you probably do. And
do you have younger students?
I do. I take them from preschool up through. I have some really advanced adults, and then I have some adults that have just wanted to get back to piano after doing it for years. So I have all ages, and it kind of keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
I
think, and then with the young kids, sometimes it's a little bit harder with the young kids, but it's fun to have the students that are really passionate and want to do it and want to pursue music. For me, I don't necessarily teach that for piano. I teach that for voice, because that's more, I would say, definitely more of what I do, not piano. But I think it's more fun to have that mix of they want to pursue music, and so you're really trying to prepare them for the reality of it. And then there's some that just want to have fun, so you give them fun songs and they get to learn how to play their favorite songs and stuff like that. So it's nice. It is nice to have. I enjoy the mix, and it's just kind of actually, I would have to say that my advanced students, you would think, would be harder, but they're actually, I know the repertoire, so it's not
It's not
It'd be hard,
but the it's, you know, trying to come up with maybe creative ways to engage younger ones. Like during the pandemic, I took on a student who was 5 years old who lived in Alabama.
Oh my gosh.
And
online too?
Online.
Oh yeah.
And
piano is just so not fun to teach online.
Well, and but I learned a lot by doing it. So I didn't do it, you know, because for the money. I didn't do it for, I did it more for my own experience to grow, because I would have to prepare at least 2 hours to entertain her, because she'd play her piece, should be done in 30 seconds. So,
yeah, you're like, we have 29 more minutes.
Yeah, I had to make sure that to keep her going, and if she didn't like something, flip to something else, and that.
And you're doing that online. It's so different. Yeah. Online, trying to entertain a kid.
And I do have to say that her mom was next to her. So if she didn't, you know,
5 years old,
you know, which hand, you know, are we?
Yeah, because you can't point to the hand to her. It's online, so you're like, it's this one. I don't know.
we came up with a lot of things, but that was hard.
Yeah, the pandemic was not good for. Yeah, music was rough during the pandemic. I mean, I remember at Vanguard, the teachers really put in so much effort to make it worthwhile for the students.
I remember that I started doing my, oh gosh, I can't remember. What was that thing called? The program that I used like all this time, that when I would play, I actually moved to the electric keyboard, because when I would play, then people could see it up on the screen.
If you had like a camera.
Yeah. So that was fun. Classroom Maestro, that's what it was called. I don't use it anymore because I have very few online students now. I do still have, but not like before.
Yeah.
It was
so glad
crazy
we're out of that.
days.
So glad that we're not online anymore. Well, we kind of talked about this, but moving to the end here, what are you doing now, and what are your hopes for the future?
I think that you kind of touched on it, like the more time for performing.
Because going back to that.
And so that is always a struggle to be the practice time, and that's what I really want to do more.
Are you wanting to cut down on your private students, and then
I'm not doing that right now. I used to just squeeze in people, but now I just keep a waiting list, and I haven't, and this year too, there's, like I said, I'll open up some more spots, and then I just didn't.
It's just
lot. I don't
know
think
how you have energy for that, like throughout the day. It's all that coffee.
It does. Yeah, it is the coffee, right?
Yeah, it's a lot.
It takes a lot of energy.
Exhausting.
Yeah.
Especially piano, and I mean, you said you had a student for 2 hours this morning.
Yeah, and that goes by so fast. It goes. Some lessons, you have to be more the entertainer, but for an advanced student, it goes really fast.
It's easier to do a longer lesson. I've never heard of a 2-hour lesson before, but that's another level. Yeah. That's someone who's pursuing music.
For sure.
Do you plan on ever stopping playing, like performing or anything, like in a way retiring, or are you kind of like, no?
Yeah,
I've been doing it for so long.
It just seems like musicians,
and you're so passionate about it
still.
That's true.
I don't. I could see at some point in time cutting back, but it would be prioritizing, like performing more so,
and that's the things that you enjoy the most. Yeah. Well, do you have any advice for people, right? Let's go with first for people in their 20s right now. What was some advice that you wish you heard when you were in your 20s? It could be anything.
Well, I think that just appreciate the time that you have, because you're not always going to have like that practice time. You're not always going to take advantage
that's what you said. You said you took advantage of a lot in college, of all the things, all the opportunities, seeing shows, being in shows,
listening.
That doesn't even have to do with music either. That could be with any major,
Yeah.
Or if you're not going to school, take advantage of all the other things in front of
Yeah,
you, you know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's good.
Because work and other things kind of, take over a little bit later on. You have, like responsibilities and that make it harder maybe to do that passion.
And that'll come. Like, you're going to end up working. You don't need to go straight to your, full career unless it's your like, it depends. Some people, it's like their joy.
Yeah.
And they're excited to do that. Some people are just going to work,
Right. Yeah.
I know, which I could never imagine that, but I do know a lot of people who, they're completely fine with their job just being their job. They're not super passionate about it. They like it, but they want their life to be separate from that.
Yeah.
Whereas for music or for artists, it's like, that's your life. That's what's exciting to you. And it actually brings you more life. It doesn't take life out of you. So I always think, and yes, I am like working what I want to do right now. But I remember when I was in college, I was like, I'm going to work my job for the rest of my life. I don't need to rush fully into this right away.
Yeah.
So like taking advantage of the other things before you settle down into work, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Good. Yeah. What about moving on in the 30s or the 40s?
Oh boy.
Different time, right?
Right.
You're like, wait, that's a completely different time in your life.
Yeah. Goodness. Well, I think that looking back to that period of time in my life, I made some choices that some other people would have thought were maybe not the best professional choices, but I wouldn't regret that at all. That I stayed home for my kids, and it actually opened up a lot of other things too, and I was an ice skating mom or a soccer mom or all those different activities, that maybe that I wouldn't have
been able to witness or be a part of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our not last guest, but one of our guests, I was talking to them and they were like, one thing I regret is I wish I didn't prioritize work over my kids because I missed so much and I missed performances because they're definitely a musical family and I missed so many performances and some of them I never even got to see. And they're like, I wish I had just said no to some things and, made some decisions.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like a lot of people who do that, they don't regret it.
Right. I don't think so. I think I would say that it is hard to get back in because anytime that you I didn't take a total break, but anytime that you, once you're going in something, you can, it's just easier to continue, but it's harder to start up.
Yeah.
But
to jump back into it.
Yeah. But it certainly happened.
Well, look at you. Now you have 50 students. So you really jumped hard back into it. Well, I think we're out of time. Thanks so much, Kara, for coming for driving here and we got to learn a little bit about your life, which, like I said, I didn't know about. I was like, all I know is that you taught me piano, but
things that I haven't thought about in years. Wow.
I know. Well, thanks so much for coming. And if you could, I would love for you to send some photos to me of like that any you have on your phone of you like as a kid or whatever that I can show like our listeners just so that they can see you, in the times that you were talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah,
right?
See what you can find. You're gonna have to like dig through. Yeah. I have a lot of people have shown me their photos and they're like, I didn't even know I had this because you don't look back on those. So yeah, I'd love to get some of those from you. But thanks so much for coming. And to everyone listening, we'll have another episode for you next week. Bye.